Oi, what's up guys? It's Comfy Noodle here. Are you an empathic person? Do you feel like you know how other people feel? Do you hear everybody say that it's a good thing to be empathic? Well, I'm here to say that being empathic can mess you up without you even knowing it. So how does this even happen? How can this mess you up without you even realizing it? If empathy is the main cause of some of your problems, you would like to think that you would have realized it, right? Well, that's not always the case. There are a lot of reasons that empathy is breaking you apart without you even knowing it. And I'm here to tell you why. What are the problems with empathy? So if you guys enjoyed this video and you relate to some of these problems, as an empathic person myself, I understand that you understand that I understand that you understand that I understand that you understand that subscribing to Comfy Noodle will make you understand yourself better. And after you subscribe to Comfy Noodle, remember to like this video because I need to understand that you understand the content of this video. Now, if that sounds like a comfy topic, let's slurp right into the video. First danger of being empathic is that we subconsciously absorb bad behaviors. We would like to think that since we have the ability to understand and feel other people's emotions, that we could use it to our advantage as information to guide us toward our goals and avoid complications. This would be the ideal way to use empathy in theory to further improve ourselves. Since we are very empathic, we tend to feel and understand other people as a natural instinct. This can happen when we watch a movie, when we talk to people, when we read a book, anything that relates to people for that matter. We are just forcing ourselves to understand and feel other people. It just happens on its own. It sounds great, right? It makes it easier to relate to other people. This in turn makes it easier to communicate with other people. We can potentially have a stronger intimacy with the people we are connected to. We can use our empathic abilities to increase the potential that our connection with people lasts longer. But this comes with a downside. The problem is actually a very big issue. When I say it is a very big problem, I mean this is the type of problem that can destroy you mentally and emotionally. And this is not just for the short term. No, very not. This is the type of problem that can last for a very long time and even potentially for your whole life. Before I tell you what the problem is, we need to understand something very important first. To understand why empathy can increase your chance of absorbing bad behaviors is actually quite very simple to understand. The thing is, we as human beings, as most people already know, subconsciously or not, we absorb some part of our environment, whether we want it or not. Our environment is going to influence how we feel and how we think. This happens to 99% of all human beings. And imagine this, we empathic people with a high level of empathy, would have the ability to understand others at a much higher level than a normal person. This means that if we are not actively being self-aware and protecting our mind, we would be absorbing our environment at a much higher rate than other people. And yes, having the ability to understand others doesn't directly translate to absorbing your environment, but it can influence and increase the amount that you absorb. After all, sometimes we spend a bit too much time thinking and relating how other people feel. We spend a bit too much time trying to understand how other people feel. And when somebody's emotions and thoughts are in our mind for a while, we subconsciously absorb these emotions and cognitive thoughts into ourselves without realizing it. This is great if we surround ourselves with the type of people that we want to be with. We can absorb all of this good energy and push ourselves to higher heights simply by absorbing good behaviors. Our subconscious can carry us by simply relying in our natural empathic abilities. So basically, we don't even need to try. Everything is natural. But there is a problem. As we can easily absorb positive behaviors, we can also absorb bad behaviors. We can easily have the ability to understand and feel other people's problems and absorb them subconsciously without even realizing it. We take a part of these issues with us even though they weren't here in the first place. Usually, this is something that we do not want. Even if we are aware that some of these behaviors should be avoided, we still absorb them. And since we are very empathic, the absorption rate intensify simply because we can take other people's emotions into ourselves. We can understand why and how they feel this way. We know that these type of people are very bad for us, but sometimes in some situation we're stuck with these kinds of people for a very long period of time. And when that happens, the natural instinct to understand kicks in and we take everything into ourselves. What can we do in these kinds of situations? We can try to separate from these kinds of environment. Sometimes it's not easy to just change environments. So what will we do in these kinds of situations? We're kind of stuck suppressing our natural instinct. And when we are trying to suppress our natural instinct for a while in hopes that we find another solution, we're still going to absorb other people by accident. This is our mind that we're talking about. It is one of the hardest things to control about ourselves. Therefore, it's extremely important to learn how to be self-aware of what we absorb and what to reject out of our mind. But here is the crazy part. Sometimes, by understanding bad energy and feeling it, we can use it as a leverage to understand ourselves better. This means that we can potentially use this toxic energy to help improve ourselves. It can become a valuable resource, but despite being a valuable resource, it can be very dangerous to do so because we can accidentally absorb bad behaviors into ourselves at the same time. This does not mean that you need to be in a bad environment to understand yourself better, but if you are in a bad environment and you're stuck in it, it is better to use whatever tool you have to understand yourself better than doing nothing, right? The second issue that empathy can have is that it makes it very hard to leave a toxic environment. To help you guys understand what I'm talking about, I will describe a scenario for you guys that you might probably relate to and may have experienced, or even know somebody that is in this kind of situation. The level of intensity may have been different, but the point is, it is still a very common issue. And this is how it goes. You start to realize that a person that is in your life is toxic. This can be a friend, a family member, or even a lover. You tell yourself, well, that's how they are. You think that you're not going to separate yourself with them just for this small inconvenience. Everybody has their own problem. A few problematic behaviors shouldn't be enough of a reason that you exclude these kinds of people in your life. You might even think to yourself that they are just in a small phase of toxicity, but with time, you start to realize that they are not just rarely toxic, but since you're an empathic person, you can feel and understand the positive and negative in them. So since they are someone you know, you are more inclined to want to see the positive side of them. So you try to remember something positive about this environment, and you tell yourself, well, even if they have some major flaws, there are still some positivity in them. You keep telling to yourself that they can potentially be positive. So every time that you sense something positive from them, you convince yourself that their negative behavior is not so bad, even if they are negative 70% of the time for yourself. And you may even think that you can even potentially influence them and promote good behaviors on them. So you try to influence them a bit, but eventually you realize that except if you become their personal therapist, their behaviors are still going to be negative and bad for your mental health. And then you also realize that it's not your job to change other people, and it's a waste of time if they don't want to change themselves. What are you going to do? Force them? Even if you're going to change them, these actions would condition you to potentially adopt manipulative behaviors. But your goal wasn't to manipulate anybody. You just want to hang out with good people. So you still try to see the light in them because a portion of yourself still want to hang out with them. But eventually, you realize that them being negative 70% of the time is actually not a good thing for yourself and even too much for you to handle. And in most cases, we aren't out here to manipulate anybody, and that you aren't supposed to waste so much time trying to change people that don't want to change. So now you're actually going to tell yourself, well, it's time we go our separate ways. You tell yourself, I'm out. I'm going to meet better people. But since you're an empathic person, you kind of spend a decent amount of time learning about how they feel and how they think. So you start thinking about how they would feel and think about you leaving them. You understand their emotions and thoughts if you were to leave them like that. So you think to yourself that you don't want them to have negative thoughts and emotions. This is because you know of the consequences that's going to have on their mental health. And sometimes these kinds of people were in your life for a decent amount of time, and we would prefer to not see people that we know in a bad situation. Therefore, it makes it so hard for us to leave this kind of environment. But you still want to go your own way. And you start to realize that your way of thinking is starting to become unhealthy because you're stuck in a situation that you want to leave, but you're not doing it. On paper, leaving that environment isn't even that hard. It's simply a matter of doing it. So you are conditioning your mind to say that it's okay to be influenced by unwanted behaviors, since you are not forced to be in this kind of situation, but you are still staying in it. And you start to realize that it's so easy to leave this kind of situation, but you are not doing it because of your empathy. You're stuck because you understand how other people feel and how you can feel what they feel. Because you don't want the people that you know to feel bad even if they are toxic for you. Because you don't want to subconsciously absorb this bad energy. You tell yourself that since you understand how the other person feels, you will feel guilty for leaving them. So you don't want to feel bad about yourself. You feel like you're a bad person if you were to leave them like that. This is because you cannot face the idea that the reason that you're stuck in this kind of situations comes from your lack of capability of ignoring the other person's response from you leaving them. So you convince to yourself that there must be another reason that you are staying in this kind of situation. This can be anything such as blaming yourself that you're absorbing negative behavior, convincing yourself that you're the toxic person since you want to stop talking to them and they are just being themselves. Maybe you think that you're the toxic person because you want to change them. With time, you may even think that you're the victim of your environment. Maybe you are the victim of your environment. Maybe you are not the victim of your environment. Either way, it is either that you find a way to convince yourself to be stuck in this situation and to not leave, or that you come to the realization that the only viable solution is to change yourself. But when you do realize it, it's not easy to quit this kind of situation. You already conditioned your brain to stay in this kind of situation. This makes it so hard to leave this environment that it is negative for you. So even when you want to commit to leave it, your minds keep alternating between wanting to stay and wanting to leave. The reason that you want to stay is because you condition your brain to say that this environment is not so bad, even if it is. You also broke a part of your confidence by staying in it. You did not change the person that you wanted to change. You did not leave when you wanted to leave. You doubted your own needs and desire, and this wounded your confidence. Because of these things that you did and that you did not do, you start doubting yourself, and this makes you doubt if you have the ability to change, because this time you have to rely on yourself even more, since while you were stuck in this negative environment, you were mainly guided by external factors, and this made you rely on these external factors. But in order to change yourself, you need to move on your own, you need to rely on your own. But since your confidence in your own ability to choose your environment is broken, it feels like staying in a situation where external factors control you feels more natural. It feels a lot more comfortable, and this makes you hesitant to leave your negative environment. But you still want to leave this environment. You still want something better for yourself. You still want an environment that's good for your mental health. So you alternate between these two mindsets. This is one of the reasons that it's so hard for empathic people to leave this type of environment. So how do you leave this kind of situation? The way that I describe this situation feels like the only thing that we empathic people can do is avoid people in general, or hope that the people that we surround ourselves with happens to be positive for us. Well, if you happen to be in an environment that is positive for yourself, then you are in a lucky situation. But we can't always rely on luck. If you want to leave this kind of situation, there are some possible solutions. I will not dive too deep into this because this is not a solution-based video. The first thing that you might consider doing is to consult a therapist. This can help you deal with this problem. It might take some time to find a therapist that works well with you, and it might even be costly, but there are benefits such as that you will have a high success rate in leaving this negative environment if you follow their advice. You will learn tools to avoid and leave this kind of negative situation if it were to reoccur in your life. If you are in a situation that you cannot have access to a therapist, then you can do what I personally did. To be honest, this won't work with everybody since all of our situations and problems are different. But if your situation revolves purely with your empathy, making you stuck in a difficult situation, and no dangerous factors that is going to put yourself in danger from leaving this kind of environment, and that is to cut off your connection with those people directly. Don't try to explain to them why they are bad for you. Don't try to make them understand. Just stop talking to them directly and chill with other people. Don't fall into the trap of doing the bare minimum, such as only responding to text. And don't start responding to a text a bit longer each time to show the subtle message that you're losing interest in them, because your empathy will just bring you back to them. And after that, learn how to not be empathic toward people that can negatively influence you, and learn how to put a wall between your understanding and emotions of other people that can harm you. In the future, I can make a more in-depth, self-taught solution-based video to learn how to manage your empathy. So if you guys are interested in that, make sure to comment below in the comment section. The third problem with empathy is that it can potentially make it hard for us to build our own identity. This does not happen to every empathic person, but it does not mean that it is a rare issue. As much as empathy can help build a person, it can also be said the opposite. Because it is true, empathy can help you not only understand others, but also yourself. While being in an empathic state, we can learn what other people feel. We can learn how other people see the world. We can see what other people see. And because of that, and while doing so, this can help us learn about ourselves. It can teach us how do we want to approach the world. This sounds great, but when we are too empathic at a very high level, and at a very large frequency, it can do us more harm than good. This is because it creates a dynamic where we are constantly absorbing, feeling, and understanding other people, and the more we do it, the more we rely on this ability, and eventually, we are always in other people's minds. And when we rely too much on empathy, we start to forget to process this information and how to use it on our own. This especially happens if we somehow put ourselves in a situation where there are too many kinds of different people. We try to understand them all at the same time, every one of them. Every time we learn something new and think that we came to a conclusion, a new information suggests otherwise. And when we are in this loop of never finding an answer, for some of us, we find it interesting at how complex and different we all are. But for others, they are put into a situation that they don't know what to feel and think anymore. They don't know if they should be sad or happy since everybody is feeling something different. When we take everything all in, and when we are put in a situation that we don't know what to feel anymore, this usually results in a sense of having a hard time to find your identity or even questioning it, because a big part of having a direction of what kind of person we want to become comes from our feelings, rarely logic. And when we are stuck in a loop of always feeling what other people are feeling and their desires, we have a harder time finding ourselves with always having a new information, especially when you spend a lot of time on social media where everybody has a different opinion. I promise you, you will have a certain degree of understanding to everybody's points, even if they say the things that society would deem as very horrible. Because of this, it makes it very confusing to what kind of person we want to be. Because when there's too many information that none of them are correct, but all of them are correct at the same time, we don't know what we want anymore. In most cases, it is usually rare to see people with this level of empathy to the point that they are just objectively feeling and understand everybody without rejecting anything and imposing their own opinion on it. Usually, people would practice themselves to have this level of empathy, but our empathic level doesn't need to be that high to put us in a state of confusion. The fourth point is that empathy can potentially put you in a position that you feel like nobody can understand you, and this can make it very hard for you to trust people in a certain aspect. Of course, empathy is not the only reason that people have a hard time trusting others, and in some cases, empathy can even help you trust other people. But for the sake of this video, I will focus on why empathy can make you feel like nobody understands you. This doesn't usually happen with empathy alone. This problem is usually created from the presence of other factors. For example, a mixture of empathy and ego can create this problem. And yes, it does sound weird at first, but you will understand after I explain it. This is common with people that feel like they are the only person that is empathic in their environment. Because of this, they are often referred as the person who understands other people in their environment, even if they are not referred as such, as long as they feel like they are the only person that has the ability to understand others in their environment. It doesn't matter what the reality of the situation is, as long as they think that they are the only person that understands other people in their environment. Because of this, they feel like being empathic is something unique and special. It is indeed very special, I'm not saying otherwise, but the problem is that when we feel like we can do something unique and special, we also start to feel unique and special, and we pride ourselves in this unique skill set. With time, we start to identify ourselves with this skill set, and with empathic people, we often feel like we are the only person that understands other people if the environment suggests it, simply because nobody showed us otherwise. Even if they did, they need to show a high enough level of understanding of this skill, and frequently enough to remind us that there are other empathic people, or else we will feel like we are the only one with this trait. But since in a lot of cases where people feel like they are the only one that is being empathic, they develop this sense of arrogance that they are the only person that is capable of being empathic. This is completely natural, since as a human being, when we think that we are capable of doing something that others can't, it is natural to want to feel above others in this field. And for empathic people, they feel like they are the only one that has the capability to understand others. This does not mean that they are not aware that other people are capable of showing this skill, but the fact that they think that they are the only one in their environment that is capable in doing so gives them so much of a sense of importance that if they were to include the acceptance that the other people can also do the same thing, they would feel less important. Therefore, they are trying to protect their ego This will make it that they will have the natural instinct to reject the notion that other people can also understand them, because that would damage their ego, since they want to feel like they are the only person that can understand others. So this would create a situation where they would refuse to listen to other people that would offer them advice if the approach required them to understand them. An example is that when they have a problem in their life, they would be uncomfortable with people offering them help if they did not experience the exact same problem. This goes as far as refusing the help from therapists. This means that they are creating a self-fulfilling prophecy that makes them feel like nobody can understand them. But in reality, they are simply pushing away everything that can help them. This means that they do not let other people understand them. Therefore, they are putting themselves in a situation where they would naturally feel lonely and not understood. Now this one, the fifth problem, is actually very common, which is that most people with empathy have a false sense of being a good person. No, I'm not saying that being empathic means that you're a bad person. I'm saying that when you're actively being empathic, you develop this impression that you need to be a good person, to the point that you're forcing yourself into actions that you do not want to do. There are many reasons for this, but I will focus on two main reasons. The first reason is that since you are aware that you have this ability to be empathic, you feel forced to be a good person. You tell yourself that since you have the ability to understand other people, you have no excuse to be a bad person, so you force yourself to always be a good person. The second reason is that since you can feel and understand other people, it creates a dynamic that when other people are happy, you are also happy. So you force yourself to do things to make other people happy, so that in return, you can also be happy. Sometimes you naturally do things that you would usually do on your own, even without the requirements of other people's judgment. But when you're intoxicated by the feeling of happiness from making other people happy, this can potentially make you go out of your way to do things that you would never usually do, such as things that you do not want to do. This is known as being a people pleaser. Because of this, you're constantly conditioning yourself, prioritizing other people's needs before yourself. And this can create an inaccurate idea of self-identity that you have. Because in both situations, in whatever reason that you have that pushes you to always be a good person, it can create you some problems in the long term. This is because when you find signs that hint that you're not being a good person, that you're not consistently having the behaviors that you wish you had, you can potentially feel guilty that you are not the good person that you wanted to be. These hints can be anything from a misunderstanding, other people saying that you're not a good person, to you accidentally lashing out of frustration only one time. So you force yourself to be a good person even more, and your behavior becomes even less natural for yourself, and you feel even more guilty about yourself because you realize that you're forcing yourself to be a good person. You tell yourself that if you have to force yourself to be a good person, and that must mean that it's because you're a bad person. So you feel even more frustrated and even more angry. So you force yourself even more. But the more that you force yourself to be a good person, your mental state becomes even more unstable. And this creates an endless cycle of guilt, anger, and frustration. And because of this, it makes it almost impossible for you to achieve the goal that you want to achieve, which is to become the ideal good person that you wanted to be. This cycle not only creates guilt, anger, and frustration, but also confusion. You start to lose a sense of who you are, and this can even result in depression. Now, there are a lot of problems from mismanaging empathy that you would probably never know if you're not actively being mindful about what you're doing or that you're seeing a therapist. So I only covered about the most common problems that I see, and some of these negative consequences I experienced them myself. I use the most general problems as an example so that I can reach out to more people. I can't talk about every negative consequence of improper usage of empathy, but honestly, there are so many of them. The goal of this video is to help raise awareness of this problem that some people may be experiencing because of their mismanagement of empathy. There are indeed benefits of empathy, but it all depends on how you use it. As stated earlier, if you feel like empathy is controlling your life and that you don't have access to a therapist and you want some solutions for helping manage your empathy, then comment below in the comment section. As always, don't forget to like and sub if you enjoyed this video. I am not your therapist, I'm just a person that is eating some noodles while also being comfy, and this is Comfy Noodle slurping out.